Hello, I'm Ann Knight. I live in Sydney and I'm here today to talk to you about my sister Diane. My sister Diane was a 66-year-old woman who had a moderate intellectual disability. She was a fun-loving person. She liked all sport, especially the Newcastle Knights.
She had an amazing sense of humour. She was always warm, welcoming, friend to everyone, loving, nurturing, but she was more like an old mother hen, especially with some of her housemates.
She interacted really well with people.
Diane was a game changer. I guess a game changer for people with disabilities. People didn't look at Diane as though she had a disability. It was all about her abilities, not her disabilities.
Diane lived at home with our parents. As Mum aged, we started to become concerned about Diane's future. I could have taken her to Sydney to live with me, but that would have meant removing her from all the local extended family and all her social networks, so that wasn't the answer. We found a placement for her with a local organisation in a group home. At first, she was really scared about moving out of home and away from Mum, but she was also excited because she was going to be doing what all other people do, and that's to live independently of their parents. And so she faced the fear head on with lots of support from the family. It opened up a whole lot of possibilities for Diane because she was able to make her own choices about her daily living, of course with some oversight. She developed self-esteem and self-confidence and pride in her own little home. Things were going okay, with a few hiccups, until the organisation that was offering her accommodation service restructured and vacated that space. They were no longer offering supported accommodation services. We went through a really anxious time, and fortunately we ended up being connected with Songbird homes. I felt satisfied that we were going into an organisation that was highly professional, very well organised with good systems in place, good training of staff, good selection of staff, and an underpinning of an ethical framework. As part of Diane's transition into the Songbird home, first and most importantly, we needed to make sure that she was happy with the Songbird home, and so she came to the house, she had a look at the house. She had a tendency to be a bit of a hypochondriac sometimes, and it was necessary to sort out what was real and what was attention seeking. And I have to say that the attention seeking behaviour over the time that she was with Songbird reduced substantially, which means that her emotional needs were being met by this new home in a way that they hadn't been before moving into the home at Head and Greta. We come from a very large extended family, most of whom are living in this local area, and those family members were very involved with Diane and would often visit her at her Songbird home, and were always treated with respect and made to feel very welcome by the Songbird staff and also the residents as well. With Diane's new home with Songbird also came a change of GP, and that GP became a very important person in Diane's life going forward. Within a few months of starting to see Diane, she noticed that there were some physical changes and sent her off to have a CT scan of the abdomen. What came back shocked us all. Diane had a 3-centimetre tumour in her small bowel and some tumours of varying sizes in her liver. We were then off to an oncologist at the Mater Hospital, and the oncologist diagnosed her as having a very rare but usually slow-growing form of cancer, neuroendocrine cancer. After about 4 months, it was obvious that the treatment wasn't working and she was physically declining. We were stunned with the news from the oncologist that not only had the cancer spread, but her physical state was such that her body wouldn't cope with any other form of treatment. and he said that it was then over to her GP and the palliative care team to care for Diane.
When Diane was diagnosed with cancer, we had to put our emotions aside and we had to be the strength for Diane to help her through it. So we helped attend her doctor's appointments with Diane and her family. We went to oncology appointments, and we also liaised with palliative care to ensure that Diane was comfortable during the whole process.
During this time, I was going through the most terrible emotional turmoil about what would happen with my sister. I knew that Songbird was not a nursing home, and that was not the sort of care I would have expected a supported accommodation for people with disabilities to offer. I thought that if I took her home with me to Sydney for me to care for her, I would be taking her away from all the extended family, from Mum and her support networks. That wasn't the answer. While I was still wrangling with this, the team leader phoned me and said, "Now Anne, I want you to be aware that this is Diane's home, and Diane will remain in her home as long as she wants to, and as long as we're able to meet her needs with safety. And anything that we can do to keep her here, we will do." And I have to say, they did. The Songbird organisation was absolutely amazing in the way they cared for my sister and opened their arms to all the family members who came and went, treated us all with dignity and respect, and offered so much practical and emotional support.
For Diane's family, it was always an open door policy where they could come and go as they pleased because it was Diane's home. Diane's family became a part of Songbird. We all became a team because it takes a team to support somebody.
They dealt with the issue of delicately handling the other residents in the home and offering counselling support to any of the rostered-on staff, and gave them the option that if it was too difficult for them to be there with Diane, they could be rostered elsewhere. Nobody asked to be rostered elsewhere.
It was an honour for Songbird to be able to have the opportunities to support Diane before her diagnosis, but an even bigger honour to be able to support her after her diagnosis and through to her journey of the end of life.
Diane, in fact, stayed in her room, in her home, until 36 hours before she passed away, at which time the palliative care sister made the call for her to transfer to hospital. But the Songbird staff continued their support of her right up until then. During the time of her decline and her inability to go out to her activities as she had been previously, it required a higher level of staff to be provided to care for her, and Songbird provided that extra level of staff without recompense from the NDIS. It took 5 weeks to get an urgent meeting with the NDIS staff to have a review of her plan to increase the staffing allocation for both Songbird and for Maywell, who were providing one-on-one home visiting and activities for her. Songbird carried that financially and never asked us for contributions for that. This was part of their care of my sister.
Supporting Diane during the last part of her journey of life was emotionally hard on the Songbird team because in a way it was like losing a family member.
Many of the staff and some of the residents attended Diane's funeral, and there were tears everywhere. Even though we tried to celebrate Diane's life, the commitment that the Songbird staff made to the care of my sister, my family will be eternally grateful for. They gave Diane, as well as a home, a sense of dignity and a sense of self-respect. I could not speak any more highly of the Songbird organisation and the ethos that exists throughout the organisation.
The Songbird team felt privileged to be there for Diane and her family.